So Steven Pinker is a cognitive psychologist, he's a linguist, and he's a science author. And he's also a professor at Harvard. So, listen, in my opinion, he's a very mixed character. I think he's very intelligent, and he oftentimes makes good points. But sometimes I think he makes really bad points. Again, I don't dislike the guy, but sometimes he strikes me as like really out of touch, and sometimes he makes bad points. And so a good example of that is he's kind of had this weird feud/non-feud ongoing with Noam Chomsky, and not the best person to pick a feud with, bro. Not the best person to do it with. Well, today we're going to talk about a bad point he made. So this is what he tweeted. Are you frustrated with the stale ideologies and mutual demonization of the left and right? Here's a manifesto for radical centrism, libertarianism, bold moderation, an open society, smart regulation, and a liberal, democratic, capitalist welfare state. So he's presenting this, and by the way, if you click the link, it takes you to this new group or new project by the Niskanen Center, and it's entitled "The Center Can Hold Public Policy for an Age of Extremes." Yes. So I read the whole thing. There wasn't a single concrete policy proposal in the entire piece. Now, my initial reaction when I read his tweet and how it was worded, I was like, okay, you're just using a lot of labels, but you're not saying anything. Say something. But I wanted to give it a chance. So I clicked the link and I read the article, and it was just all label humping. And you could see it in his tweet. Dude, you're just describing third way politics. You're just describing the new Democrats. You're just describing Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. That's what that is. Again, I'll read it again, okay? And for those of you who know politics, this will immediately ring true to you. Are you frustrated with the stale ideologies and mutual demonization on the left and the right? So in other words, both sides are so extreme. Both sides so extreme. Well, here's a manifesto for radical centrism, libertarianism, bold moderation, open society, smart regulation, and liberal democratic capitalist welfare state. And in the article they say, well, listen, what we need to do is listen to both sides, the reasonable sides of both sides, at the same time. So in other words, in some areas, we need smart and better regulation and for the government to be more efficient. And in other areas, we need to embrace individualism and capitalism and competition more. Dude, again, you're just describing Bill Clinton's philosophy. Like, that's exactly what Bill Clinton's philosophy is. And Macron, right now, Macron in France, this is exactly what his ideology is. You know what his approval rating is? Under 20%. So, I think I get frustrated because the label humpers annoy me, okay? And there's a lot of them now, where they love to go out there and say, me, bro? I'm just a classical liberal, you know? That's what I am, bro. I'm a classical liberal, and I believe in the battle of ideas, and I got all these ideas, bro. I'm not going to tell you them, but I have them, and they're really good ideas. And so I believe in the battle of ideas and the exchange of ideas, and I'm a classic liberal, and I believe in like free speech and stuff. Are you going to actually ever fucking say anything? Like, are you going to bring up any specific policy at all, ever, at all? And the answer is no. They love to do this. Listen, here's why this annoys me. This is the lazy man's intellectual, okay? So in other words, this is drivel about, the center is good by definition. And people who don't really follow the news on a regular basis, don't read this stuff closely, it seems like it's a really smart thing that he's saying. But it's really ignorant. It's not always the left and the right are equally extreme and bad, and we just need to find the middle point. I got news for you. The overwhelming majority of the time, that Washington, D.C. does something bipartisan, it's bad. So, for example, Wall Street deregulation, that was bipartisan. The Iraq War, that was bipartisan. Now, every now and then, they'll throw a curveball at you, like the First Step Act, this new criminal justice reform, that was good. Getting out of Yemen, that was good. But most of the time, they do the Patriot Act. Most of the time there's bipartisanship, it's because Democrats and Republicans agree to screw you and do the bidding of their corrupt corporate donors. And this is like, I don't think corruption was mentioned once in the article. And you want to come out here and talk about a new politics in the era of Trump and in the era of rising populism and in the era of an anti-establishment, anti-corruption, fervent feeling among the population. And you're going to come out with this new political doctrine and you don't even mention corruption? Because here's the deal. He looks at populism and he goes, that's inherently bad. You want to know why? Because he's kind of elitist. He's elitist. Now, I don't mean that with the pejorative sense, with a pejorative connotation. I happen to think it's a pejorative, but I think he might even defend that. Like, yes, no, seriously, I'm an elitist. I'm not a populist. I'm an elitist. And I will defend the establishment. I will defend the status quo. I will defend Western civilization and open society and democracy. But the point is, it's the lazy man's intellectual to say, wow, the center, man. The center's where it's at, bro. I got this radical centrism. I just want to talk about good ideas and mix these good ideas. And there's just a lot of vapid, vacuous, label-humping, and flowery words without telling you really what they're actually for in terms of policy. And to the extent they do that, because I would say that this vague description does match Bill Clinton's politics, Macron's politics, even Obama's politics. Well, listen, we've had this ideology implemented from the 1990s. You could argue going back even to the early 1980s when Reagan first came into power. So if we've had this neoliberal centrism in place to kind of barely rebrand it and then propose it as if it's this genius idea without even saying anything specific, it just strikes me as really stupid. It really, and again, I think Steven Pinker's a smart dude, but when you talk about politics, you're saying a lot of things that are just goofy and kind of laughable for somebody who's immersed in politics all the time on a regular basis, like me. Like I just did a segment for you guys earlier. I said, here's a list of the policies the Democrats should propose. Now, listen, I believe in social democracy. I'm not totally post-capitalist. I mean, some ideas might be post-capitalist, like incentivizing worker-owned co-ops. But outside of that, I'm not post-capitalist. I'm a run-of-the-mill social democrat. But I can give you concrete ideas as to what I'm in favor of, and I just did a segment where I gave like fucking 40 of them. But this is just drivel, label-humping silliness, man. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I've gotten really angry recently with this notion that centrism is good by definition. Because there's an assumption there. And the assumption is like, well, the midpoint between two claims is usually, by default, the most reasonable. And it's like, well, no. The Republican Party has shifted so insanely far right that they're bordering on fucking fascism. Okay? And the Democratic Party has always said to them, we'll meet you halfway. So the Democrats really represent this ideology. Oh, radical centrism. Yes, that's Bill Clinton. That's Hillary Clinton. That's Obama. And the Democrats keep meeting the Republicans halfway. So now the midpoint between the ultra-far right and the center is the center-right. And that's what you're describing here, and that's what they are, and that's what they represent. And they've gotten their ass kicked and their ass handed to them for decades now. And they've gotten obliterated. And their fucking crown achievement, Obamacare, has an approval rating that hovers around 50%. Now, I'm not saying it's all bad. There's a lot of good stuff in there, protections for pre-existing conditions, so on and so forth. But the real answer is Medicare for all. So it's almost like they're making a virtue out of these mealy-mouthed, centrist programs that are too reliant on capitalism and corporatism and the free market and elites. And it just strikes me as an old idea that he thinks is a new idea and he thinks is so genius and he thinks like, who could really disagree with this? Well, again, go look at Macron's approval rating in France. He kind of agrees with your little manifesto here, even though you don't go into specifics. It's very vague, but from what I get from it is centrism good, innovation good, competition good, regulation somewhat good. And it's like, okay, yes, this middle ground approach, this accepting of the neoliberal world order, and just kind of dressing it up, that's not, there's no there. And it actually is not liked in the realm of public opinion because it doesn't offer much. So, again, I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a dumb guy. I just think he's the lazy answer intellectually is the one he fell for, Like, we've all experienced it. We all know these people in our personal lives where they just, like, happen to think that by definition centrism is good and not, like, oftentimes a really tired, old, stale, philosophy that actually is kind of dominant in Washington, D.C. and kind of led to us despising our government because you're finding the center point of a massively corrupt, pro-establishment, right-leaning system, and that's not inherently appealing. But listen, when you're a Harvard professor and you're doing fine and you see the rise of the scary populists around you, it's almost like he doubles down on the wrong approach to that. And you're left with this flowery, nonsense, platitude-laden, cliche-laden, label-humping nothingness. And that's what I think it is.